Hello and welcome back to the Argyle Financial Controller Leadership Forum, Priorities, Predictions, and Concerns. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our speakers. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce Stephen Faulkner with UiPath. We're excited to have Stephen with us for a fireside chat titled Automation at Scale, Vision to Value. Stephen, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Very pleased to be here once again and have this opportunity to have this experience with the audience. With that, I'd also like to say I'm delighted to introduce and welcome Simon to our conversation today. We're truly fortunate to have someone like Simon to participate in the conversation. He has a wealth of experience in driving global transformational programs. So we will start by Simon sharing some slides around Cisco's journey and some of their learning experiences, which I think will be highly valuable to everyone on this in the audience. And then maybe we'll drop into a couple of questions. So without any further ado, Simon, very warm welcome. Thank you so much for participating in the chat today, and I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself and to start the initial presentation.
Thank you, Stephen. It's a pleasure. I appreciate having the opportunity. My name is Simon Brock. I've been doing transformation programs probably for over 22 years now. I started back in Australia, and then I had moved, had an opportunity to go to Brazil, lived in Brazil for 11 years, and then I moved to the US in 2015. So I've had the fortune of working in high tech for the majority of my times, as well as telecommunication. I used to work for Vodafone back in Australia. And then I moved into Sun Microsystems, and then from Sun Microsystems moved into Oracle, and then into Cisco. So I've been in Cisco for the last 8 years. So let me share my screen. There we go. Right. All right. So the journey within Cisco from an RPA perspective started in 2019. All right. So we're relatively new as far as RPA is concerned. And when we kicked that off, we basically created our Center of Excellence. So where we actually set up our governance for RPA, and then we moved forward and basically created 25 bots. The difference that we have at Cisco realistically is we are citizen developer driven. All right, so I will walk you through that. But what I want to be able to show you is realistically the journey that we've had over the past couple of years is increasing developers, but also putting in a number of bots which have basically saved us. So at the moment, we've got 103 developers where we have approximately close to nearly 100,000 hours saved. But the focus at where we are actually going to try and move towards is more into test automation, as well as we want to start to look at machine learning and AI, as well as document understanding and process mining. So that's where we are trying to go. If we look, something. All right. If we look at our structure, right, we have the Center of Excellence. And from there, as I said, it gives us our governance. And then we have my team, which is a digital transformation office, basically overseeing the Center of Excellence. And then we have structured what they call automation leads. So within each of our finance functions, We have automation leads which are responsible for their respective functions, and they basically then support the system developers. All right, and I'm not quite sure what happened. I had an overview of ours. Give me 2 seconds. I might have picked up the wrong deck, which I thought I had.
Oh, it's no problem. I mean, what's super interesting, right, is actually 2019, if you think about it, is quite an early adoption of RPA and automation. I think when you think about most organizations, they probably started their journey 12 to 18 months ago. So as you look for that presentation update, maybe you can also just build on whether the initial kind of start of the journey, was that a strategic imperative, or how did it start, just out of interest, as you kind of look for the presentation?
Okay, I've got the presentation, so give me 2 moments. It came as more of a finance initiative as opposed to Cisco, like core Cisco. And from within finance, we actually had a funny type of relationship with our IT partners, you could say, because we did not do what you would probably expect, in the sense that you would have a very strong partnership with IT to be able to set all this up. Cisco has an interesting relationship within our IT organizations, and the model was basically, we don't want to trouble too much or have this as an IT run type of program and controlled by IT. So back then, our VP, Nick Fink, he decided that we will go with a finance approach where we'll be 100% finance resources. We won't basically go and try and get anything from an IT perspective. So that's how we landed on the citizen developer approach and the methodology, and that's basically how it started, right? And it was we went through a bit of a journey, in the sense that we started with one automation company, which I'm not going to say who it is, and then we ended up changing automation companies to UiPath, and we've basically been with UiPath ever since. And it's actually been a pretty good journey from that perspective and partnership. So it was a bit of fun and game. We actually chopped and changed. We started, then we stopped, and then we restarted again. So, but yeah, I mean, now from like a program perspective, we are established, because we've been doing it for the last 4 years. Or 3 years, and we're going into our 4th year now. And as part of that, we are now looking to really expand, because as you can see from this, we've got 400 bots live. We've got over 100,000 man hours saved a year, which is actually quite significant for us. Yeah. And then the 400 bots that we have is broken up between attended and non-attended. So the difference here, I'm not quite sure if you are aware, from a user perspective, you've got attended basically means that the actual bots are initiated on the actual users' laptops and systems, right? The unattended are our virtual machines, where they're basically sitting in the background and the bot just runs, right? So that's the difference there. But again, we like to cause ourselves our own problems when it comes to unattended, because we need to make ourselves more secure from our perspective. So we need to be able to see how we can scale the unattended portion of that, because of credentials, which is realistically where we have, I won't say a problem, but we have a challenge that we need to be able to solve for. And that's basically going to be my next type of foray, is to see how we can actually scale to have more unattended within our infrastructure. And then from a user perspective, we've got 571 users and we've got 103 developers. And down the bottom, from a graphics perspective, you can see out from a developer perspective, we've got in the US, in Asia, and then Europe, and then we've got a couple of people, actually got a person in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Mario, who I actually know quite well. And then from a user perspective, we're all over the place. So, which again is good. So we have a high presence within Europe, and then the US, and then Asia, and so within Latin America as well. So that's our user base. So
very interesting. Hey, Simon, I'm sure we're going to get this question from the audience, and I hope you don't mind me just asking as you're working through the presentation. But normally you would see that relationship between attended and unattended inverted, right? So
yeah,
that's principally because of your concerns around security and how you started that journey, that you kind of started with such a heavy bias towards attended automation.
Yeah, it's because, again, we went from a finance organization perspective without actually having a full support from our IT. So there was no IT developers that were there, as well as we have a very strong authorization security prospects and stuff like that. Being Cisco, we need to make sure that we don't allow anyone to do anything which they're not supposed to. So when it comes to virtual machines and people's credentials, we need to figure out how we can actually be able to do that appropriately. We use single sign-on for everything, and we also, as part of accessing our systems on our own network, we use a security device called Duo. So every time you log into a particular application, it wants to make sure that you are you. So we have everyone's little mobile and stuff like that. So every time I access a Cisco or a particular URL or site, it basically comes up with Duo to say, am I accessing, and I need to authorize. So that's part of the concern, well, part of the challenge that we need to be able to work with is, if it's a remote machine, how do you allocate to that remote machine? Because Cisco doesn't, or Cisco IT does not allow to have dummy users and stuff like that. Everything has to be tied back to a Cisco ID. And all these bots and stuff like that, we need to be able to have someone log in to use their credentials. And because of single sign-on and stuff like that, we have to work out how we can actually do that. So that's the reason why the attended is actually quite so high and the unattended is relatively small, because we got a bit of a pass, you could say, from our IT to help us with the unattended, because we want to be able to continue to do things from a back-end perspective, but we need to figure out how we can do this at scale. Because to give you an idea, these 40 unattended are running off of 7 virtual machines, and we want to ramp those 7 virtual machines up to 30 virtual machines, and then see how we can do that even further. So that is the fund that we need. Well, actually, that's the fund that I need to solve for in the coming year.
I knew this was going to be interesting. Wow, what an insight. Really clever. Thank you.
You're welcome. So from where we go from a glance, this is just a brief overview of our finance functions. So from here, within each of the functions, we basically, as I said, we have an automation lead that is responsible for that function. And within our corporate controller group, we have a number of different functions underneath that. And then from within that group specifically, we have broken out the automation leads into specific functions associated with them. So we've got invoice to cash, procure to pay. The global accounting has got their own revenue, and now, because revenue is actually getting quite large, they now have provided a second automation lead. So we've got 2 automation leads responsible for revenue at the moment. So that's basically our landscape as far as our finance organizations are concerned. And then underneath that, we've got our citizen developers for their respective functions. And the way that our bots go is the citizen developers are the ones come up with the ideas, or even within the functions they present an idea. It then goes to the automation lead to review. There's a criteria which is set, and the automation lead reviews all the ideas to see does it meet the criteria, and if it does meet the criteria, they approve the idea, and then they assign a developer to be able to go and do that RPA. And then when that happens, then once they actually finish, or if they have any questions, then my team helps guide that. I've got 5 people in my team, which basically are there to provide support to the system developers. And we take on more complex type of bots, and we basically help do that development. But the majority of the stuff is basically evangelizing RPA within the organization and providing assistance, as well as starting to look at the different types of technologies. As I said, we're moving towards using automation. Right, we want to be able to automate a lot of our testing. So the test suite, we have started that. We've actually built 3 different types of test suites at the moment to help within different functions, and we're starting to expand that out as well. So that's we're looking to grow that as part of FY23 fiscal year.
Yeah, it's a very complicated model, but the one thing that I do love is everyone gets the opportunity to redesign their work, right, through that citizen development approach. So
yeah,
really interesting.
And it also helps. I'm not quite sure if everyone has seen that when people talk about RPA, some people get a little bit nervous that they're going to automatically shed jobs, right? And the finance leadership, like our CFO staff, basically reinforce the fact that what we are trying to do is not reduce jobs, but to basically shift. Right? We want to give the actual individual employees the ability to be able to use their brains and their skills to be more analytical and to go where it's better suited. Right? Anything which is repetitive in nature and stuff like that can be automated. So let's do something from that perspective, so they can actually work on more higher value type of tasks, and that has been reinforced. So, and because each of the SVPs have reinforced that, they've built a good culture within the actual finance organizations where everyone is freely coming up with the ability to come up with ideas. And then one of the things that we launched going back a little bit in 2021 was what we call Automania, which is a finance competition where there is, funnily enough, money involved. So you got first, second, and you got four places. So the first 4 places get some money. The first place actually gets quite a nice sum of money. Each of the participants get $4,000 if they win. So it is actually quite nice. And so that had sparked a lot of interest. So when we first launched in 2021, we had probably around about 87 people apply, or teams apply. When we did it last year, we ended up having like 147 teams applying. They have a maximum of 5 people in a team. So it sparked a lot of interest, and we actually have some really good ideas. So as part of Automania, we have a skill component. So each of the people applying as part of a team, each person needs to do some additional studies So we have courses and training available. They had to undertake the various trainings, so they took that on, and then they actually started to use that technology. And then one of the bots, which I don't have here, but I'll talk about it, is born out of Automania, where it basically has, we're actually going live in December for this bot, and it's going to give us a total saving of 16,000 hours a year, just on one bot. And the user base is looking at over 160 people that will be utilizing this bot. So it's actually quite large. And so the areas that we have, like the common use cases, again, because you need to be thinking with the mindset here, we are dealing with citizen developers, and because we are starting the journey, there is no ML AI technology here. These are all very, very I won't say simplistic, but I mean, they're all basic bots where we are doing certain things. So you're doing journal entry preparation, journal entries themselves. We're doing reconciliations. We're doing forecasting and variance analysis. We're doing data extraction and manipulation. So they're the main 4 things that we are doing with all of our bots. So the 400 bots that we have out there, they all sort of fit into these type of 4 different areas, and the bots that go from complexity as well.
That's great, right? Because that actually, as we've been chatting, there's been a couple of questions, right? And one of the questions was, where do you see the greatest operational advantage? And I guess that's somewhat influenced by the citizen led development program that you've kind of shared with us. But I think you've answered that question. It really is around these 4 categories, right, that you've seen the greatest return so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's more repetitive in nature. So you really need to be able to look at your business processes and see which are repetitive. I mean, the example that I said, we've got one bot which is going to save 16,000 hours, right? And that bot is associated with credit management, right? Believe it or not. So we have 40 credit controllers throughout the world. Right, so in each individual theatre, and the theatres I'm talking about is EMEA, APAC, and the US. So there's 40 credit managers, which, as part of their weekly type of analysis, they spend roughly about 2 hours a week looking at analysing different types of sales as far as the creditworthiness of each sale and stuff, which is or proposal which is coming through from an order perspective. All right. So it's 2 hours a week, for 40 people. And then on top of that, we have 120 sales people, which again, they are looking at the same type of doing additional creditworthiness analysis as well. So with that, you've got like another 120. So you've got over like 240 hours a week just on those activities, right? And then when we do the sums and stuff like that, comes up to over 16,000 hours a year, just doing very simplistic things, right? Of saving them time. If we got one of the other things that we had, and I'll get to here, is we have in here, we've got like 80 users with 40 different reports. So running reports, everyone does it, right? It's just a matter of how often, how many times you are doing it. And with this particular one, this was our highest currently, where we've got 80 users. The credit one, which is going in December, it's going up, as I said, to 160. So it's doubling the number of users that we have here. Yeah. So in this particular one, we're dealing with like 40 different reports. All right, so we're logging into Oracle, doing everything from there. But the cool thing with this particular bot is we've developed a WebEx chatbot. So we use, obviously, You might be using Teams or whatever else. We are Cisco, so we're using WebEx Teams. So within there, we actually have a chatbot, which is called Kira, which is Indian or Hindi or Sanskrit for action. So you go in, you call up Kira and say, Kira, I want to run this particular bot. And Kira goes and does it. And the way it does it is there's a template which is on a shared point where you put in all your parameters and what you want to do. And then you just turn around and say, you do this once, and then you go into Kira and say, Kira, run this bot, and Kira goes and runs the bot. It goes, completes all the reports, downloads them, puts them onto a SharePoint, and makes them available to you. All right, so you don't need to log into any applications or anything like this. And they basically, you get the reports just by typing, just texting something to a Windows Teams.
Very, very impressive. So it's like a digital assistant, right? It just takes all of that redundant time out of the process. Very good.
Exactly.
One of the questions we've had, Simon, just while we're chatting, one of the asks was, the developer to user ratio. They worked that out at 5.7. I don't know whether that's entirely correct, but is that something that you have benchmarked, and does that feel about right, or is that an upfront investment that you've had to make to get the program off to the start and the success that you've seen?
It's been a gradual intake. So it's definitely not something that we've come up with as far as a magical number or statistic that we want to get to. We actually wanted to grow our developer community quite significantly. And as I said, we started off very, very small. And then we've had initial growing, and then we're getting more people coming in. And we want to continue to grow that, right? So we don't really have like a ceiling as far as developers. We really want to stimulate as many developers as we possibly can, and talking very, very honestly and candid, even though that we do have a citizen-led development, you are going to have challenges associated with that, right? And the first and foremost is going to be maintenance, right? Because the citizen-led or citizen developers that we have, they have a day job. They are not 100% dedicated to developing bots, right? They've got their day job, which they need to do, and the development is on top of that. So, which is, again, they're doing the work because they really want to try and save their time as well as their colleagues' time, right, to make them more efficient. All right, so that's where you get the interest and where they really want to be able to do. And so, but as I said, the maintenance of that, because it basically comes a bit of a challenge, because they create the bots and then they don't particularly always want to do the maintenance of it. So that's, unfortunately, the maintenance falls back to my team, which becomes responsible for the maintenance. We do have some really fastidious the citizen developers. If something actually does happen, they go back and they fix it. But by and large, unfortunately, they're happy to build something, but if it breaks, it's like, well, you can fix it.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing that, because I think that's also one of the common questions that we get is, is there maintenance, and then does IT maintain these bots as you do application or firmware upgrades, or does a transformational office have to take on that burden? And it sounds like your team does take on that, and there is work associated with keeping these operational. So
that's exactly right. Yeah. So unfortunately, it falls onto us. As I said, we came up with this program basically sidestepping IT. So we are, to some extent, we have to live with that. And what I'm doing is I'm also partnering a lot more with our IT organization. So we've been able to get some additional support from IT where previously they didn't do it for us. So now we're starting to move into more of a collaborative type of process. And then, because I said, I want to build the unattended, so which means that I need to bring the IT organization more into our fold and see how we can work together, and try and continue to build that. Right, that's basically what I'm doing at the moment. Is I'm building that relationship, right, making sure that we are partnering together to see how we can actually expand. But primarily, all this is 100% finance. Right, so it's finance for finance. So if someone from some other organization within Cisco wants to do something, right, and they can ask us, and we're more than happy to help, and we do, but there is nothing really there. I mean, within the other organizations, unfortunately, it's very siloed, unfortunately, right? So, but that's something, again, that my ex-VP was trying to solve, but it's like an elephant, right? You can only do one bit at a time, right? But we need to be able to get to that. I mean, and that realistically is where we want to go. Is, I mean, if you're thinking about an organizational approach, then I would strongly suggest you have the conversation with your IT to be able to form a partnership, to be able to do it, that you can be able to do it at scale, and that you are saving for across your company, right? Because realistically, you need to be able to look at it holistically, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's so many different areas or so many different opportunities, right, which are there. And if you have the ability to scale it across the organization, you're going to see vast ability to be able to economize. And I've been talking to various partners, KPMG, Deloitte, Accenture, EMY, on what is actually happening in different areas, and they're saying the same thing. You need to be able to get the scale and to get the most benefit out of it. You need to be moving to the next direction, which is basically looking at ML, AI type of technology, as well as document processing, because you can take documents, read those documents, do transactional work, or do other type of reporting based off of that information. And to be able to do that, you need to have IT partnership, because they're going to have access to different applications, as well as you want to be able to have all of this running automatically. You want a program to run like every 5 minutes or every minute or whatever it is, or every half an hour, to do it by itself, because you don't want to be locking someone's laptop. You want these things to be flowing freely. So, as I was saying, my next step is I need to scale on the unattended. I need to solve for that, as well as we want to move forward into the machine learning and the AI. So when you create a bot, it's able to recognize how it was resolved, how you fix something, and it learns. And it will continue to do that, but we're not there at the moment. I hired a Python developer back in August, and he's now helping us to slowly get into there. And then that's why I'm saying we're like having one little nibble, and then making sure we understand and try and expand that out. And that's what this financial year for us, or this fiscal year for us, FY23, which finishes in July next year, is basically what we're trying to be able to get to, is put our feet in there. We want to be able to ramp test automation, because I'm not only responsible for RPA, I'm also responsible for what's called country enablement within Cisco. So, and I do a lot of testing, like I enable new entities which have got like the full gamut of like invoice to cash, all the way through to record to report, procurement, everything. So the ability to be able to test for that particular entity, as well as do a regression for all of our entities. It takes up a significant amount of time. So the test automation suite, which is available, is basically what I'm looking to utilize to be able to strengthen and also to reduce my costs, because I spend a lot of money on consultants. And the testing takes up a large amount of time, of my time, or my team's time. So if I can automate that, I'm going to make real savings, right, in that part, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, that's great, right? Because we actually had one of the audience did ask around the quality assurance process that you have in place to avoid bots not doing what you designed them to do, right? So I guess it's part of that test suite approach that you kind of do the preemptive risk assessment and make sure that it does what it's designed to do.
Yeah, so if we go back to the model that we have, right, as far as this is concerned, right, system developers, they're the ones that are building the bot, right? And if there's an issue or a question, they come and have a conversation with my team, right? And then we can help build them with the coding. But once they've actually completed the actual bot, they have to system test it, and then they submit it for quality assurance. And the quality assurance is done by my team. So it comes down, my team goes and reviews everything, make sure that the code and everything else is good and it's not breaking anything, right? And then once it's quality assured, right, only then we actually approve it to go into production. And as part of our cycle of building, right, we also have got SOX testing as part of this. So anything that is touching a SOX control has to be reviewed by one of the SOX auditors as well. So it's not only when we look at a process, we make sure that is it touching a SOX control. If it's touching a SOX control, it actually has to be reviewed and approved by SOX before it even goes into production. And then once they've got their approval, then it becomes part of our quality assurance as from my team and then once we sign off on it, we can then put it into production. So
it's like a really robust process, and inevitably, I think you sharing that, we've just received a question that I'd like to put to you, if that's okay.
yeah.
The question is: have you had an experience where a bot that you developed failed and didn't have the impact that it was designed to achieve? I guess the basis of the question is, the learning experience you can share where you actually kind of take something forward and it just doesn't have the impact that you assumed that it would have.
The answer is yes. One of the things that we are doing is we have a nice laundry list of bots which have been created and just don't work. And as part of that process, we are utilizing the automation leads to be able to help validate, to understand, okay, is this bot really, or this business case, is it justified, right? And if it is justified, then realistically, it's going to come into my team, right? And then we'll go through and we'll fix the bot, or we'll go and have a look to see what was happening, and then we will then take over that bot, and then we'll make it work, right? And then once, as part of the validation process, it goes back to the user and to the AI or to AL to be able to validate the fact that the bot is doing what is expected, right? If the automation lead determines that the bot is no longer required, then we basically ditch the bot, right? So we don't do anything. But the automation lead is the first person that we go back to, and they need to be able to say yes, review the scenario and review the bot, and take it from there. But yeah, I mean, because we all have those type of challenges as far as, okay, you think something's going to work and then you go and do it, or we are looking at different types of metrics now, because we've got metrics on every single bot that is run. So what I'm doing as part of a post-mortem is I'm going to review any bot which has not been run in the last 3 months, and then also look at that from an annual perspective, because again, I mean, the bot runs once a quarter. It could be because it is a quarterly process, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be able to look at the frequency, because again, if something is not run that often, then you need to go back and question, well, why was it there?
Perfect. We've got about 5 minutes left, and we've got a couple of questions in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to just run through these just to make sure we cover all the audience questions.
Yeah, please.
One of them is about skill set, right? And I think you started by sharing that the ambition really is to try and give time back to people. This is more about if people want to get into the development, and I guess this is in development side of things. What skills should they be thinking about, and how would they take that forward in terms of actually maybe building automations themselves?
Okay, well, again, our system developer,
yeah,
they're you and I, right? They're your accountant, they're your accounts payable clerk, they're your cash receipt person, right? They are everybody, right? So my team, I do have more techie type of people on my team, yes, but the actual vast majority of our system developers, they're all accountants or some form of accountant, or they're a clerk or whatever. They can be anything they like. Right, so they don't have a predisposition to being IT people that can run SQL and stuff like this. Right, so as part of our training that we have various RPA training that people can undertake. So they go and do that training, right? And then on top of that, we've got additional technology as well. So as part of our RPA or our automation challenge last year was we opened it up to have a look at VB macros, right? Yeah. So there was training on VB macros. We have basically ended up having like six or seven different types of technology, Power BI, Power Apps. People were learning, and again, it was basically they went and did these courses, which we paid for, right? So we had all these courses available. People did those courses, and then they basically took it on from there. And the beauty of it is that you don't need to be a programmer to be able to do this. And without giving too much of a plug to UiPath there is very logical on how you can build a bot. So again, you don't need to be a developer. We've created a lot of reusable code where it's drag and drop, and then you go and change things around. So it is quite accessible to people that have got no programming skills. So probably the most enduring quality that people need to be able to be thinking of as far as training is their willingness. Right? If they're willing to do something, they've got a passion or they've got some form of excitement towards it, then foster that. Don't worry about the technology part as long as you provide the training. Right? If you've got a good, robust training, then you're fine.
Fantastic. Let me just try and squeeze one more question in. And I think we've only got a minute, so this is going to have to be a quick one. The question is RPA and automation just for larger Fortune 500 companies, or can smaller organizations drive value from this automation journey?
It's for everybody. Repetitive tasks, right? It doesn't matter if you're a huge company or a small company. If you're a small company and you're doing a lot of repetitive tasks, bingo, you've got it right there and there. My foray into RPA was back in 2000, where I was using what was called a keyboard emulation software tool called Data Loader. Right, and it realistically was a macro, whereas you had to put something into a spreadsheet, and it read every single column going across, and then went row by row by row, but it was column and row. But I used that, and I configured over 160 books, and did over like intercompany rules and stuff like that. We're over 10,000 rows just using that wonderful piece of technology back in 2000. So you can do, it's not for large, right? If anything which has got repetitive in nature, you will save you money.
Simon, thank you so much. I think we're out of time now, and there may be one or two questions we didn't get to, but I said at the beginning, it's a real honor to have someone with your experience and knowledge, and just to share that as openly and transparently as you have. So a big thank you for that. I'll pass it back to Michael, I think, who's going to conclude the session now. But really some really good learnings there. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Stephen and Simon, for an insightful fireside chat. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today for this fantastic session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Stephen, Simon, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Cheers.